Our guest today, this is going to be a real treat for you, but our guest today is a fellow that I have known personally and professionally for 50 years. Hard to say that, but those are the facts. Mike Schmidt and I were in law school at the University of Kentucky in the late 1960s. At the same time, we were not in the same class. When he graduated in 1971, he went back to his home in Johnson County, Paintsville, set up a law practice. Of course, I came back here. I didn't get as far east as Johnson County, fortunately, and so I didn't practice with Mike directly during those early years, but it wasn't long before I heard about him. And what I heard early on was that pretty soon he was the best trial lawyer in the 24th Judicial District. And then a few years later, he was the best trial lawyer east of I-75. And by that time, I started running into him in places like London and Somerset and other sorts of places. And before long, he became one of the preeminent trial lawyers in the state of Kentucky. In 2007, he was inducted as a fellow into the American College of Trial Lawyers. In 2015, he was selected the Kentucky Defense Lawyer of the Year. So having reached the very pinnacle of success in his profession, you would have assumed that he would then sort of just slide into retirement and stay in Johnson County. Wrong. In 2016, he accepted an invitation to come to Frankfort and to chair the Kentucky Public Service Commission. Everybody I know thinks that serving as a commissioner on the PSC at this point is one of the most thankless jobs in state government. The PSC, as all of you all know, consists of 3 commissioners, and they are charged with the responsibility of oversight in all of Kentucky's public utilities. They are deluged every day with paper. They get applications that will contain thousands or tens of thousands of exhibits and documents and data and reams of paper, and they've got to read that stuff. And then after they read it, they've got to conduct a hearing. Some folks in this room have been to a hearing this year, and you know how that works. The commissioners are there, and they are fully engaged in the process. Those hearings sometimes go on for a long, long time. I was up there this summer in a case that involved more lawyers and more parties and more expert witnesses that we could comfortably fit in the hearing room. And the hearing would start in the morning, and it would go all day until midnight. And then because they didn't have a jury to deal with, they'd come back the next morning and start over again and go to midnight again. And they continued to do that sort of thing until it was finished. But that's not the end of it. Then they get to read the transcript of all of that stuff and distill from that an opinion. And the opinion may be 30 or 40, in the case I'm talking about this summer, the opinion was 50 pages long. And then they start the process all over again. I was eating dinner after Mike went to Frankfurt in 2016. I was eating lunch with some folks down at the Kentucky Farm Bureau. They know Mike well because he provided them counsel all over the state of Kentucky for 4 decades probably. And one of them said, "Did you see where Schmidt took the job as chairman of the PSC? What in the world was he thinking?" and one of the other fellows, there was not even a pause. He said, "Wait a minute, guys. You got to remember, he's from Johnson County, and he was looking for another mountain to climb." and so it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you one of the fellows who is keeping the ship afloat in Frankfurt, Chairman of the Kentucky Public Service Commission, Mike Schmidt.
I appreciate everything Rob said. I don't deserve all those accolades, however. When I was contacted and offered the position of chairman of the Public Service Commission, they said, you don't have to, now this is a Republican administration coming in, you know, and didn't have a lot of experience in state government, said, you don't have to worry about it. Said, this is the best job in Frankfort. Said, all you have to do, said, you don't have to work 3 or 4 days a week. Come in when you want to, the staff will do everything. When after the first week, I had no utility training, so I didn't know. I think maybe I had one case like in 1974 or 5 for a little local utility there, and hadn't been back since. So I thought, well, I got down there, I didn't know anything, and so for the first week or two, you just kind of sat around and tried to figure it out. And somebody in Paintsville, I went back to church on Sunday, they said, well, how do you like the job? I said, well, this is the easiest job I've had since I was a lifeguard at the Paintsville swimming pool in 1962. But I found out the longer I stay down there, the harder this work actually gets, and it's sure not easy. The Public Service Commission was founded by the Kentucky General Assembly in 1934. It's been in existence in various forms ever since. It's composed of 3 commissioners who are appointed by the governor and confirmed by the state senate. Their terms are staggered 4-year terms, and they're removable only for cause. One thing I can say about this position is that we've never had any interference, never any contact from anybody about any decision that we've ever made. So we've always been encouraged to try to do the right thing, and if we don't, it's just because we made a mistake and not because there's been any influence. But we do regulate in terms of rates and service all electric utilities in the state of Kentucky. They're all investor-owned except for the co-ops, Big Rivers in the west, East Kentucky Power in the east, and there are 19 distribution co-ops that they have in between. And one of the differences is for those co-ops that makes it, I think, so enjoyable to regulate them is that they're owned by their own customers, and they do the best they can to provide the best possible service at the lowest possible price. And both of those generation and transmission cooperatives have had challenges, but as far as I can tell, in fact, I did an article in Utility Quarterly a few months ago, and I said both, in my opinion, were very well managed, and I think they are. We've been working recently, and we ought to have an order out in a couple of weeks, with the 19 distribution co-ops in an attempt to streamline their rate-making process, which ought to save their ratepayers a lot of money and help them keep their rates reasonable. One of the differences is, if you don't know, and you probably ought, just a little background about utility work, investor-owned utilities basically operate under a system of what's called a regulatory compact. And that is they get a defined territory and they provide all the services without competition, and the Public Service Commission is an artificial competitor. And so we have to try to basically see that they run lean and mean and not fat and sassy, that they get enough money so that they're entitled to pay their shareholders and operate competently, make money, and keep their investments in their infrastructure up to the point where people get good service. And I think they do that, and I think the co-ops do that. I think, on the other hand, the biggest problem that we see in the Public Service Commission is with local water districts. And local gas companies, privately owned gas companies, that for whatever reason either don't have the managerial skill and don't have the customer base to support keeping their infrastructure in place and up to date, and therefore over time they let it deteriorate to the point where it undergoes catastrophic failure. I say that, but before I go any further, I want to say that doesn't apply to your utilities. I know we don't regulate. We regulate, I think, 117 Kentucky rural water districts, maybe 38 water associations. We do not regulate city municipal-run electric, gas, and water companies. So the city of Lebanon is outside the scope of our jurisdiction, except for the regulation of wholesale water rates when it sells water to a rural water district. And so we'll run maybe 450 to 500 cases a year, and of those, 10 or 12 will involve water rates between a city utility and a county water district. But we've only had one that involved a formal hearing, and that was one that your two utilities were involved here. I looked up before the hearing, our present commissioners read as much as possible every single thing that's in the record. The past practice of the Public Service Commission involved, I'm sure some of the commissioners, maybe all the commissioners read, but staff would basically go through the record. We have financial analysts, lawyers, others, and they would go through and write a 25 or 30-page detailed report setting out, here's the essential facts, here's the issues, and we make these recommendations. We've eliminated all of that except a bullet point, because it is our job as commissioners to make decisions, our job as commissioners to know the facts, and not the staff's. The commission historically, or at least by the time I got there, was a bottom-up commission where basically staff ran the operation, and now the commissioners run the operation, so there's nobody to blame but me and Bob Cicero and Talina Matthews. The other two commissioners, Mr. Cicero and Ms. Matthews, are both highly competent. Cicero is a better accountant than anybody we have at the PSC. He's a graduate of the University of Pittsburgh. He has an MBA from the University of Pittsburgh. He was in the finance department of U.S. Steel for 20 years, and he's run a number of businesses. And he is as Mr. Talley can tell you, he's I don't know what, but detail is his forte. You know, he'll try to figure out how many angels can sit on the head of a pin. Talina Matthews has a PhD in economics from the University of Kentucky. She's been a state employee for a number of years. She's great on energy policy, and she's great on electricity. Mr. Cicero wanted to get into natural gas, and it's up to the chairman, and I'm the chairman, to make appointments, and he wanted to do that, and so I appointed him to that position. And on NARUC, the National Association of Utility Regulatory Commissioners, he sits on that committee. I was always a natural gas person. I did a lot of natural gas work throughout eastern Kentucky and southeastern Kentucky, so I ended up with water. And so, not that I know a lot about water, but I know enough to know that most water districts in this state are in serious trouble. I looked up, I was going to say what started me on that tirade. Before we had our hearing in Frankfort on your water districts, I checked in as much as I could about both, and I do know that we regulate Marion County, and Marion County on our risk ranking system. When we came in, everything was sort of at random, but we took all natural gas companies, distribution companies in the state, and all water companies that we regulate, and we had some good computer people that we brought over who were executives in other cabinets in state government who lost their jobs when administrations changed, and so we got some excellent people who weren't ready to retire, and politics having nothing to do with it, we got them in there, and they basically developed ranking systems for every water district and gas company in the state. And I will tell you that the best ranking is 1, and there are only 15 water districts in the state that have a 1 ranking, and Marion County Water District is one of those. So you're to be congratulated. But what I will tell you is that the American Society of Civil Engineers has issued a paper that Kentucky will need $8.2 billion in water infrastructure improvements over the next 20 years and $6.2 billion in wastewater infrastructure improvement over the same period of time. That's a lot of money. And I know that the Division of Water out of the Energy and Environment Cabinet made a presentation in August to a committee of the General Assembly, and I've got some of the slides, and I should have brought them here and showed you, but they basically take the position that this infrastructure problem is serious, and it's the most serious problem we have in terms of local municipalities, not Lebanon, but towns like Jenkins or maybe Pikeville or other places in Kentucky whose systems aren't run as well. But those in rural water districts, those are their main problems. But that's not their main problem. Their main problem is just terrible management. And the infrastructure is not in place. The infrastructure is deteriorated, and the ratepayers are going to pay for it, and you're going to pay for it. You have good systems, but you're going to pay for their systems because somebody's got to come up with the money to bail all these people out. And what they've done, I made a presentation before the Department of Local Government, and I actually got pretty good reviews. I thought I'd probably be run out from the county judges because the problem with a lot of these districts is people will call me on the phone, and they'll say, Mr. Schmidt or Mike, if they know me, I'm from so-and-so water district, and God, we're about to go broke. We've got to do something, but the county judge won't let me raise rates. They won't let me file for a rate increase. And I said, well, I can't help you. I can't file for you. But what we found on management is many of these people are, and a lot in eastern Kentucky where I'm from, maybe that's the worst, they're appointed because their brother campaigned for the judge, or they did this or did that. They don't know what they're supposed to do. They don't really care. And when the judge or the fiscal court members don't say, oh gosh, you can't do that, you can't raise rates, you've got to keep them down because people will blame me, that's what they do. And I'll give you an example in a minute of a terrible situation. But what the duty of these water district commissioners is to their organization, and not to the county judge, not to the fiscal court. They've got a duty to their own ratepayers. And I can tell you right now, I could prove it financially if I had time, or we want to get somebody to debate it. But if these districts would raise their rates a little over time, if they would have a competent manager as an accountant, say, well, I can't afford that. Well, you bet you can't afford not to have a college-educated manager, and if you can, an engineer or somebody on staff. That's going to be required in the future, because when they won't raise rates, and then when they do get rate increases, they squander the money. They get in every rate that we give, there's a depreciation in there, and that depreciation is to fund replacing infrastructure. Have a program, a capital improvement program, but they don't do it. They take the money that's used to improve the pumps and the pipes, and they spend it on something else. And as a result, over time, the whole situation completely deteriorates. On Monday morning, the Commission will issue a decision in a rate case filed by the Martin County Water District. I don't know if any of you have seen that. I got a lot of press when I called them the worst water district in the state. They may be the worst water district in the United States. The U.S. News and World Report claimed they were the worst run white majority county in the United States. That's a shame that they put it that way, I guess, but I don't disagree. But they have had, since 1997, the Public Service Commission, the University of Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky University, have been in there trying to help those people. We've had management audits, and they have entered agreed orders as to how they were going to fix the system. The system wasn't broken. They could have fixed the leaks, and now they have a water loss of 72%. That means for every 100 gallons of water that they process and send through their system, only 28 gallons get to the customer. They're losing $300,000 a year in water, and we're not going to let them recover. The ratepayers shouldn't have to pay for 72% of the water that they never get. But their pumps won't work. They continue to put people in position, in that position of management, who basically refuse to do anything for the district or are totally incompetent. But we have developed for them and have been working on this for some time, a process of trying to do the following. One, better educate water district commissioners. We have taken over complete training of new commissioners. New commissioners by law are required to have 12 hours training in the first year of their appointment. We have entered an order that only the Public Service Commission's training will be accredited, and for other training, other commissioners who want to get up to $6,000 a year in income can do that if they have 6 hours of accredited training a year. The Kentucky Rural Water Association and others have provided such training in the past, but the training, much of the training has been for operators and employees and has not included course material, or as much as should have been included, in my opinion, for water district commissioners. There's a statute that requires this training, and the training is supposed to be high-quality management training so that the commissioners will enhance the commissioners' ability to develop policies and oversee the actual management of districts. And so you've got to know something about accounting, depreciation. And I told somebody one time, nothing wrong with this. It was a bad comment, I guess. But I said, well, you know, because you've been a plumber or a pipe fitter doesn't mean that you can that you have the education, training, and experience to supervise a water district. Now, you might have, and you can certainly get it if you get the training. But I heard somebody said, in Western Kentucky, they had a dispute and wouldn't reappoint some people, and the Public Service Commission had never interviewed. They always said, well, we don't have time. Staff said, Mr. Smith, we don't have time to go down there. I said, well, you don't know who wants you to interview. I'll go down there. But we'll have them come up here. We had one come up, and we went, did this. Well, we just did video conferencing. And the 3 commissioners interviewed them, and what we found out was the other 2 guys that the county judge wanted would have been good commissioners if they had the appropriate training. But the ones they had, one had been on the commission like 10 years, and he was a retired construction company owner. The other was a retired school superintendent. This commission had won 3 water quality awards. They had a capital improvement program where they had come to the PSC 4 or 5 years before. They had borrowed money, had a rate increase. They had replaced infrastructure. They had now paid off their loan, and they were coming in again to do the same thing. And I thought, well, why fix it if it ain't broke? So I don't know what the judge thought, but we appointed the 2 people he didn't want and reappointed the others. But in doing our interviews, we contacted people that lived in the community and ultimately found out that the manager of that district apparently had, or members of his family or something, had come afoul of the county judge in a political race. And so the whole point of replacing these 2 people was to get rid of the manager. And the thing that disturbed me about it was this, is that I don't think county officials a lot of times know how important appointing commissioners to these water districts really is. That's an important job. In Martin County, some guy told the judge he got laid off and he needed a little income when he saw was one of his relatives at a funeral home, and he appointed him to the commission. And that's fine, but he didn't think that he needed to know anything or do anything, and as a result, he never found out, he never did it. One of the things on our training, and then we'll get down to something else, but I wanted just to give you an idea of what some of our training involved, if I can find it. You know, as a trial lawyer, somebody said, well, you know, you never know what you're going to say. And I had thought about this, been down here for a day or 2, and I've changed it on the way down here today, so I had no idea how it was going to come out. Like they say, Rob, that in every case, there's 3 closing arguments. The one you intended to make, the one you actually made, and the one you should have made. So I don't know where it is, but I'll tell you this. We have a lot of management training courses, and they go into how to hold a meeting, what you need to know about depreciation, and where you can go and find out if you don't know. And we have people available to Public Service Commission who will try to help out in any way we can, but unfortunately, we don't get a lot of requests. Last, I will tell you this: the PSC, we regulate maybe 400 gas utilities. As I said, 145 water, all of the big electric utilities, and we do things like more than just rates and more than inspections. We're developing educational programs like this one for water district commissioners that we hope to hold 4 or 5 times a year rather than the 3 times we do. We are developing a natural gas education program primarily for cities, and we don't regulate cities, but what we found was when we came in to office, we were 138 gas inspections behind. We've now caught those up. We have a risk ranking system for all local gas companies, and some of these gas companies are like housing authorities. They actually are utilities, and they're required to obey the federal law. And unfortunately, it would scare you to death if you saw some of these places. They don't put odorant in the gas. They don't have any corrosion control, and they don't do leak surveys. And there's a town not far from here that we fined a fairly substantial amount of money because they had not been having leak surveys. The mayor says, well, I didn't know. Now every time we do a gas inspection, the mayor and every city council member gets a separate letter. So nobody will know. And we started fining people some fairly substantial fines. We fined Louisville Gas and Electric $395,000, and we were kind to them because they had a gas explosion that could have been resulted in a lot worse. On some of the local cities, we went out in Olive Hill, for instance, and Olive Hill had a bad gas line. Their main gas line into town had washed out. They would not fix it. And over the couple of years before we got there, they said, we'll fix it as money became available. So we got an estimate of what it would cost to fix it, fined them $10,000 more than it would cost, and gave them 30 days, and we'd forgive enough to pay for the repair. And you know what? That line, didn't work they couldn't fix for 2 years. It got fixed in less than a month. And so we're trying to use the carrot and the stick, I guess. This is the stick, so that the money that we have assessed in civil penalties after a hearing, we've tried to give back to get the necessary repairs made, because we don't gain anything by keeping their money. Okay, so we're now doing the dig law, enforcing the dig law. If somebody wants to know about that, most of the people who are paying the fines in the dig law are not the diggers; they're the gas companies, because and they're the big ones, because they never get out in a different problem we haven't faced yet, but we're getting ready to, is where they never come out in 48 hours as required by the law to mark the line. But many of the times when they come out to mark the line, they mark the line in the wrong place. And so the civil penalties are $1,200 or $1,250, $2,000 for the second, and $4,000 for everyone after that. Everyone who digs into a line gets one chance to mitigate their fine by coming to an educational program at the Public Service Commission, and we're holding our first one on Monday. And we've got 40-some people or companies coming in, and they've got to spend a few hours there with us that they won't like, but they mitigated their fine from $1,250 to $250. But we have, I'll give an example, it's a public record. Louisville Gas and Electric Company has more than $40,000 in fines, and they are 1,000 requests behind in locating the lines. And as a result of that, we are opening an investigation into their practices, and we've told them that, and they have fired their line locator and have hired additional people. But they are, I use as an example, but there are others. But the problems, it turns out, are not so much the people who are doing the excavating as it is so much the people who own the gas lines. And it probably wouldn't shock you, but it did me. Most of these big companies, many of them don't even know where their own lines are. Obviously, that's why they mislocated. okay? Anyway, I did want to say this, that the only solution ultimately for these rural water companies is basically you can get better management. Instead of having them locally appointed, maybe they'd be nominated and you'd have a governor or somebody appoint where you could get economies of scale, where you could get more regionalization, and maybe in some instances they really need less local control. In your situation here, I guess during the hearing, I asked commissioners and I guess managers from both sides, well, because it seemed like both companies were so well run. Why do you live in a nice county and you've got great systems. Why are you operating two systems and are at odds over water rates when if you had one system, you'd have better economies of scale. You could probably operate with, if not less staff, more efficiently, eliminate overtime. You could, at some point in the future, I don't know who the managers are or qualifications, but I promise you, these systems are going to have to get larger and larger because water use is getting less and less. So they're selling less water, but the cost of maintaining the infrastructure keeps going up. And you've got fewer people or the same people, you're not growing enough to keep the rates low. So, but if you have more people, you're spreading the cost over a larger number of people, and so you can have the same quality you have now. You can have, I won't say better management, but in the future, you're going to have to change management. The commissioners who are good now may not be the same people who are going to be here in 10 or 15 years. It just seemed to me like that you could have, the opportunity at least to keep your system up and running a lot better if you were combined. And I think that's true of most places, but like everywhere else, what we find is that, and it was true in my county and others, this is our water system, and we like this, and we don't want to be involved. Or the county, doesn't like the city, and the city doesn't like the county, and there's either political problems, or it's just, this is the way we do it, and this is the way we always want to do it, and we're not going to change. But I do know this, for 3 years or so, I was on the Paintsville Utility Commission, and we had a water, wastewater, natural gas, and garbage collection, and we ran water. We had all over our system. The county system went broke, and so the city had to take it over. But we sell water, or we distribute water in the city of Paintsville, in Johnson County, in parts of Lawrence County, Morgan County, Floyd County. And when I was on there, I was an attorney, we had another attorney, Mitch Kenner, we had an engineer, and 2 businessmen. And the city council on its own, without any prompting, and after years of it being the other way, we put on the commission, the city put a person was eligible. You didn't have to live in the city. You could live in the county, or you could have a business in any place that used the water, okay, or used the gas. And as a result, even before that, it didn't matter. I never thought about, well, I'm going to make decisions or vote based on it being in the city as opposed to being in Floyd County or opposed to being in Lawrence County or Morgan County. All I thought of was, hey, this is our system, right? And we're going to do it for us. And it just never occurred to me. And I think that's the way most people are, although I know it's all of us will say, well, I don't know if I trust them. But when you all get together and work together, you're all one family and one community, sometimes it makes sense. But nobody ought to force you. Nobody can. We can force mergers, but not between the city and a county. If we could, Prestonsburg would be running Martin County Water District today, but we can't do it. But all I say is I hadn't been in your community here for, 6 years or so. Maybe I took a deposition when the prison was here, but you live in a beautiful place, and I can see why businesses would want to locate here and people want to live here. But I don't think anybody ought to be forced to do anything. But you probably ought to consider it. because in the end, it might or might not make more sense for you. It's your decision, not mine. But that's why I ask, and I suppose that maybe that's why somebody asked me, well, why won't you talk about consolidation? Consolidation is going to happen. It has to happen, not because of your system, but because of the way most of these others are run. But anyway, thank you. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
I have
Yes,
a comment. Having lived in Arizona and West Texas, this area is certainly blessed to have water.
Well, and I don't know what you know about Arizona water systems, but Arizona's the worst state in the union. Well, here's why. Because they have, it's in a desert. And if you have a subdivision or somewhere, the developer has his own little water utility. And they've got hundreds and hundreds of those things, and they're all going broke, and they can't deal with it. They absolutely can't deal with it. But Kentucky has done a good job going from, 400 and some, I don't know, it was a lot of them.
Yeah, it used to be over 2,000, now we're down to 400.
Yeah, so, but,
Cities.
yeah, I mean, if you could, ultimately, it's like county consolidation, nobody wants it, but you're going to get it, because in the end, you just can't afford to pay for duplication of services. And that's the same as it is everywhere. You had city school districts and county districts, and now there are more and more It's just how it is. And once we all understand that we're all human beings, we're all family, and we all live in really the same community, you can say, well, it's not so bad after all.